Hello Internet, I'm the Disney Brain, and welcome to the Girl Meets World review. Last time, we talked about the cast beginning their high school careers, and the rift that was created as a result. This time around, we get to see how the plot points Part 1 put into motion are explained and resolved in Part 2. No need for any further pretense, so with all that said, let's dive into Girl Meets High School, Part 2. So we start things off right where Part 1 ends, with Maya and Riley in the hole together while their friends are off attacking high school in their own way. This leads to a zany scene where the football team is going nuts right before Lucas and Zay request to join. Now, Lucas is one thing, but if their opponents are even close to the size of everyone on this team, I'm legitimately concerned about Zay's safety. We also get a scene where Farkle and Smackle are trying to impress the resident brains of the high school, but quickly realize that their past accomplishments don't mean much to them. I get what they're going for here, but seriously? This guy cloned himself and made a fully functional robot? That's just taking the idea way too far. But the larger point here is that everyone in the main cast is having their own problems, or battles, as Mr. Matthew phrases it, and everyone starts to feel a little to blame for having split up their group. This leads to a scene where the trio of seniors visits Riley and Maya at the famous bay window. How they actually figured out her address is anyone's guess, but in any case, they explain their perspective on the situation, and we find out that they used to be part of a 6-person friend group that was split up through the trials of high school. They even give us another freaking love triangle. That's just dandy. But in truth, what the seniors had to say was meaningful and made a lot of sense. So in the end, Riley and Maya did end up learning a great deal from those older than them, but as we learn, that doesn't automatically make their perspective 100% right. Shifting gears here takes us to the Augie-Ava side plot, where Augie introduces Ava to his imaginary dog Scruffles. So yeah, that's a thing now. To be fair, it's something that's important to Augie. But to be unfair, it's just as ridiculous as having a high schooler bring his robot to class, and Ava gets sick of it rather quickly. But this side plot, while by no means memorable, is easily forgivable since it did help bring Ava a little more joy in her life at a time in her life where she could really use it. Getting back to the main plot, the friends are reunited again and are trying to talk things over after having experienced a pretty rough first few days of high school. We, the audience, always knew that there would eventually be a resolution that brings the main cast back together, but what's important is how and why. We experienced the how. They all feel badly for having let high school and change come between them, and that functions well. And through both their discussions here, as well as Mr. Matthews' lesson later on, we understand the why. Life gets harder as you grow older, and the things that worked before won't always work now. But friendships, genuine connections you create and work on with people that mean something to you, that will get you through the hardest of times and get you back on your feet when life puts you on the ground. But seeing it from the point of view of the seniors proves that sometimes change leads to permanent rifts, so this episode also gives us some solid perspective on the matter. This episode also proves that you can learn a lot from others, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't look to go out and challenge the status quo either. There are pros and cons for both sides of what the cast is fighting about, and depending on the situation and your own perspective, either side can at times be right or wrong. And the episode ends with the seniors explaining that they wanted to leave something of a legacy behind, so that the freshmen know to stick together, something their former friend group failed to do. And that's Girl Meets High School, Part 2. Kind of a strange episode for several reasons. Let's start with the stuff that works. The inevitable conclusion that sees the gang back together again works because both perspectives on the matter were effectively challenged, with no one side being completely correct. The idea of having each other to take on high school is more important than the ways and means they choose to go about doing that. The seniors serving as mentors with their own experience also works well because their past is more or less exactly what Riley and her friends are going through right now. But I am left wishing that they would have saved their true intentions and backstory for a little later. Even in the context of wanting to help these freshmen, it's a little peculiar to be doling out major life stories so early on. I think it would have functioned a little better if the seniors continued messing with them a little bit more and then later had them reveal that they saw a lot of themselves in the main cast, and then a little later than that, reveal the part about leaving a legacy. It just felt a little out of place talking about legacy again when this school year has barely started. Beyond that, the ways and means that this episode conveys the struggles of Lucas, Zay, Farkle, and Smackle are a bit ridiculous, especially the Farkle-Smackle scene where they meet the resident genius. Nothing about the situation works as an effective counter to Farkle's intelligence because it's inherently over the top. Football players are much bigger in high school. That makes sense. This didn't. They could have toned it down and gave us a more realistic depiction of a high school scholar, something for our geniuses to aspire to when they become seniors, but this feels like something pulled out of a much, much worse show. I really don't want to turn this into a full-scale rant of how Disney Channel just doesn't understand intelligence. That would take all night. but as someone who wholeheartedly believes that being smart just might be the single greatest thing you can be, outside of being a decent person, seeing things like this in an otherwise great show is really off-putting. There also could have been a much deeper narrative with Augie and Ava this time around, one that doesn't include imaginary pets of all things. Like how Mrs. Forsky died, and that was a major change Augie had to go through because just like Ava, someone important to him is gone. It would have also given a chance for Augie to address his own emotional state of being in the wake of all the change everyone else has been going through. Well, except Topanga, who doesn't really have anything to do in these first 2 episodes. All in all, this episode had the setup necessary to be great, but what we got was only kind of good. The stuff that works in part 2 works well, but I do feel that some of the best parts might have been even better if handled a bit differently. But the parts that don't work really feel like missed opportunities to create something memorable, or at the very least create something that makes even a little bit of sense. I wouldn't call this a bad episode by any stretch, but I do think part 1 has it beat as a complete episode, and it's relatively easy to figure out how certain parts could have benefited from a couple minor changes here and there. But the important part is that the friends are back together and stronger than ever, and now that they've survived their first major test, it's time to see how they handle even more daunting struggles going forward. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, throw it on a like, subscribe for more, and share it all over the internet. And don't forget to follow the Disney Brain on Facebook and Twitter for updates. Links down below. The coming days will bring the Teen Beach 2 DCOM review, and maybe a Liv and Maddie review right before. I'm not gonna lie, making videos will be pretty tough these next couple of days because my real-world schedule is particularly crazy this week. So, if I can't get a few reviews done in a timely fashion, just know that it's not from a lack of trying. But, either way, plenty to look forward to. Until then...
And here comes Jungle Girl. She's waiting for motorcycle boots. Vroom, vroom. Vroom, vroom, baby!